came to Papua New Guinea a well-trained, experienced surgeon, and there were still great holes in my armamentarium. So what I used to do, and I would strongly recommend it to anybody else in this kind of a situation, identify a gap and then look up a review of world literature and find out who's the best in the world, and then contact them, and they're very, very helpful. Or contact the nearest to you. And I've found this very, very helpful. And as a competent surgeon, you're very quick to pick up the essence of the thing. So maybe 1 or 2 weeks with that person. So every year I would take 2 weeks study leave, or every time I went on holiday I'd take 2 weeks study leave and go and do an intensive 2 weeks on that particular thing and get the skills. And then, of course, the thing was I'd go back home, back to Papua New Guinea, and get all the people in I hadn't been able to deal with, because I needed those skills, and that really consolidated the skills. And occasionally the person would come back with me. And so where you feel a big gap, now you wouldn't need to wait for your study leave. I mean, in Australia you have a huge potential, and if you found something presenting that you weren't dealing with adequately, just find somebody and say, you know, can you give me a bit of time? People I find, tend to be extremely generous with their time and their talents, and are particularly concerned to make a contribution to the more distal field, if they're central, by training somebody to do a better job out in the field. I'm not attracted to the challenge, I'm attracted to the need. And then in trying to meet that need, you have to face the challenges. And I think if you're not a person who likes being challenged, you've got to face this and grit your teeth and get on with it. And then when you face them a few times, then it doesn't worry you anymore. And there are various ways of doing it. If you're in a needy place with very poor resources, then you need to get good donors who will help you out. And there are international donating agencies with huge resources who are more than happy to put you on their list, get your bona fides, make sure you're a genuine case, and then they'll keep you steadily in supplies for the rest of your tenure. There's international relief, sends relief all over the world, and they have an input at a high level. So what happens is when Olympus decided to stop a range of gastroscopes, they put all those into international relief, and those went all over the world. So that kind of thing, quality equipment available. And at the top, a firm that did a range of chewable paracetamol, and it was vile. I'm not surprised it didn't sell. So they had huge amounts of this available. Now, of course, in Papua New Guinea, they used to taking very bitter anti-malarials, so tasting vile didn't bother them any. So that was just a total godsend, because we whacked it right out to very provincial places where people the old people had aches and pains from their arthritis, and the hunters and the gatherers and the people chopping trees down all had aches and pains. So this was heaven in a bottle for them. Also, if you're in a slightly larger place, as when I was in WEWAC, there were various contract people coming in and out doing roads, and they got together and provided friends of WEWAC Hospital, and the contractors coming in all chip in and get you the best. I mean, you might not have a decent bandage. There's a big problem with procurement in Papua New Guinea for various reasons, and the stuff that's actually delivered to you. I mean, we got recently a shipment of combine, and it's meant to be a thick padding of cotton wool held together with layers of gauze or something else. And what you got was a sheet of gauze with an occasional island of cotton wool, and it was totally unusual. And we reported back, and they said, yes, we found this and we've come to terms with that. And what you can do is secure a supply of good quality materials through your friends. And I've found it's better to work totally outside the hospital milieu, because if there's a problem with hospital funding disappearing or not getting to you, if you've organised the friends and you can get them to put money into a bank account that you can access and nobody else can. Of course, if you're a crook, then you've got yourself a nice setup. If you're not a crook, you can do a huge amount of good for your patients. So you need to get yourself back up from somewhere. Rotary are very good, but their donations tend to be unsorted, so that quite a lot of it you can't use. But the part you can use is solid gold in a situation where you've got nothing. Also, the St Vincent de Paul in Australia, their medicines are sorted by retired chemists. So they're really good value for money. They don't have a lot of hospital stuff, but they're very glad to find a hospital outlet where the bit that's donated they can send to you. So I've got a regular supply of nebulizers, the occasional catheter things, which they were glad to place, and I was delighted to get. Also, the supply firms in Australia are very generous. So if they're withdrawing a line, they might offer it to you. Or if sutures are about to go out of date, they'll send them over to you. By and large, the people who are in it for making a big profit are more than happy to support people who don't have any money by sending things in their direction when they're getting near their expiry date or near the shelf-by date. So, but you do need to make the contacts and get those people to support you, otherwise you end up... However, having said that, ordinary bleach, household bleach, is available all over the place. Can be diluted to make a dilute antiseptic solution. You know, you get the appropriate dilutions, makes an appropriate antiseptic that you can use for dressings or sterilising surfaces. And a place that's got surface water, you can always buy fishing line for your sutures. And as I said in the talk, river fishing line is fine, and you use that for skin. And deep sea marlin line is very strong and can be used for abdomen. So you'll never be short of a suture if you're anywhere near a fishing resort. I think all human beings have within them a core of goodness and an urge to help the fellow men. You can, by self-indulgence and selfishness, just let that fall away. And then you're the person who goes to make the maximum amount of money, and it doesn't matter how, in the minimum amount of time, and then indulge yourself. And I think these days there is a big movement. People have found that huge amounts of everything doesn't bring them happiness or joy. And you look at primitive communities which are very disadvantaged but are notable for their enjoyment of everyday living. I do think, though, it's essential that if these people are to be supported in their outreach to their less well-endowed fellow men, they've got to be given a livable lifestyle. And a lot of these advertisements here show you the generalists working in the bush with an appreciation of the beauties of nature and that kind of thing, which I think is very important to the whole man, to advert to these. And I think that's really important. If you are going to run a system, you've got to run it where the human needs and aspirations are satisfied, as well as the need for service. And you know, in the big disasters, when people like Oxfam and the Red Cross go in, they always make sure that their workers are well fed and well housed, because otherwise they catch whatever's going in the disaster, the typhus or the cholera or whatever, and they all die, and then they're not doing anybody any good. And this has already been brought out in this meeting. You've got to look after yourselves, and that isn't selfishness. There was a priest, a missionary, who was going to live poor and live like the people, and he went to a poor bush mission, and the people said, don't do it. We're born to this, but you're not, and you'll get sick. So after 2 years, he was medevaced out, and the people were raging with him, and they said, this is your own fault. Now you're going, we'll never get anybody again. You should have looked after yourself and looked after us. And they were right. Yeah. They were happy to chip in a bit of extra of what they got, so that he didn't live on a poor deprived diet at half strength. I think it's very true. You've got to look after yourself. Well, for instance, people who go into a situation and work themselves into burnout. You see this quite a lot with missionaries. And there was one priest in a bush mission, and he used to work, and then when the priestly side of things got heavy, at Easter or Christmas, when there were big liturgies, he used to complete it and then collapse and be flown in. And I'd stick him in a room with one carer and put a big notice on the door, no visitors, just to let him get his breath back. And one day somebody came and said, but I'm his bishop. So I went and said, I'll change the notice. So I put no visitors, particularly no bishops, which he took very well. But this guy, you see, hadn't got the balance. hadn't got the balance. But then he was in a bush mission. He was excellent generalist, but he got all the burdens of the church as well, and it wasn't a viable lifestyle. He had lots of support and other missionaries around him, but of course he got the balance by collapsing and coming away and having a break. When you are out at the periphery, particularly in this kind of a situation, you've got to teach and teach and teach. You teach on the wards, you teach in the theatre, you teach in the street. When we had the cholera epidemic, we never actually got a homegrown case of cholera in Kiunga. I set up a cordon sanitaire around the place. And we got some choleras coming in, but we got them and treated them. But we had a visit from the sister who was running the cholera hospital in Moresby, and she was very reassuring and said, it just isn't that disastrous. Get them early and get the doxycycline into them and get the ORS into them, and it just switches off. It's quick and it's easy. But you've got to get across the awareness. She said, awareness is the key. Right, so I then got all my staff together and gave them 3 talks. And the public health side was failing lamentably. They were all sitting with expenses paid in a big hotel planning, and they had no incentive to go and do anything outside because, they were having a wonderful time. Same when there was an earthquake, they planned for 14 days, and by the time they got out, everything had finished. But, so my nurses said, I'm going to my corner and I'm going to give this. So they went to their own corner and gave plenty of Toxavis. And we got copied the mine leaflets from Taberville, and people were flooding in. We were just giving out, help yourself, help yourself, help yourself. And we set up a little cholera station in case anybody ever came with cholera. We did get 3 off a boat that had gone into a cholera and come back with cholera, and treated them just with, there's your doxycycline, there's your ORS, start drinking, there's your loo, there's your toilet paper, there's your shower, there's your pop for your specimen. And one of them, they were quite intelligent people. They were going on a bush Toxavi for the OTDF Foundation. And one of them, they were petrified. They thought they were going to die. And one of them said, is this the Black Death? So I said, no, it's not the Black Death, fortunately. And so they sat and relaxed and chatted. And then we got the specimens and did the dipstick. Yes, you've got cholera, okay, fine. So they said, so what do we do now? So I said, well, you go home. But what do we do? I said, we've done it. You've had your doxy. Just wash your hands, cover your peck and boil your water. Is that all? Yes. Well, that's easy. Yes. Well, why has everybody got cholera? Because they're not doing it. It's like Nathan, isn't it? I could go and wash in the rivers at home. They're much better than this Jordan. Because, if it asks you to do something difficult, you do it. Go wash in the Jordan. And it's the same with cholera. But I used to walk into the bank and it was absolutely packed. And I'd say, heads up, I'll give you a Toxavi. Cholera, we've not got cholera yet, but we may get it. Don't forget, wash your hands after you've been to the toilet before you eat. Cover your peck and boil your water. And then I'd stand in the queue, go into the shop, go to the checkout. Hey, heads up, wash your hands, boil. And one time there's a big queue outside the house, and I said, now, remember, wash your hands, boil your peck and cover your... No, that's not right. They fell about laughing. Do you know, that was the best thing that could have happened, because it went right round town. The doctor said, boil your peck. Can you imagine? Yeah. And this spread the word. They got the message. Wash your hands, cover your peck and boil your waters.